All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December 3rd meeting of the Hamilton Planning Board. It's about 7 o'clock. We have a full agenda tonight. We have site plan review continued for 5963 Willow Street. We have amendment to an existing special permit for Cantor, 354 Highland Street, minor modification. We have an A&R for 6 Bridge Street. And probably a little later review our open space and farmland preservation bylaw and review minutes and other board business. Given that our applicant for the A&R is here, and it should be a few minutes, I'm going to take him first, and then we'll get into the Willow Street site plan review. So, Jim.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone.
Can you just go to the podium?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Thanks.
Forgot about that. Good evening, Jim Kresser, and I am here looking for a Form A endorsement of the plan that you have in front of you. The properties are 6 Bridge Street, which is the wooden property. The abutting property is owned by Doug and Carolyn Trees, which is at 557 Bay Road. The purpose of all of this was simply to correct an old survey error that resulted in a small portion of the Trees house encroaching over the lot line onto the wooden property. The properties are both undersized, non-conforming, which required us to go to the zoning board for a special permit to permit that. That was granted. Yesterday was the end of the 20-day appeal period on that, so I have that decision with the clerk's certificate. We tried to get it recorded today, but apparently a lot of people had the same idea I had, which was to record electronically. So there was a very long queue at the registry to get things recorded. So that will get done first thing tomorrow morning. The plan you have in front of you shows a very small 380 square foot strip of land that the Woodens are going to convey to Trees so that everyone's houses are on their own lots. There's no encroachments over the lot line, and everybody lives happily ever after. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Thanks, Jim, for the description. That's helpful. As the board members are aware, the big element that goes into approving an A&R typically is, does it have access? Obviously, this does. One thing I wanted to ask you, Jim, were you aware that there wasn't a title block for signature or a signature area on here? Because I know the registry is going to ask for that.
Typically, there's
For the signatures.
board, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I didn't even notice that. I see the title block for the registry.
Right.
Yeah, for the signature of approval.
Oh, well, next month.
I wonder if he meant for it to go in the block on the bottom right. He's got a date
Yeah,
line
date there, maybe.
We can always.
These are not brand new surveyors we're dealing with, so I'm a little surprised that that's not there.
Can we just sign it and just put them one on below the other?
As long as the registry will take it,
Right.
that's fine with me. And
Yeah.
if they don't, I'll have to have the surveyor get another Mylar cut for you.
Okay.
But I don't see any reason why the registry won't take it as long as there's
Okay.
signatures on it.
All right.
Any other comments by the board?
No.
I'll make a motion, we approve the A&R for, what's the address here, 6 Bridge Street, the Wooden and Trees properties, as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Wells.
Is it easier if we all come over there?
We have to sign.
Jim, if you don't mind, once you have that recorded, could you electronically send us a copy? Thank you.
Yeah, it's below the others.
I'm gonna need 5, right? Alright. Do you mind if I sign over your name?
Just the solo one that they can read mine.
No, it needs to
You didn't sign?
We have enough, but.
Thank you.
Biggest deal in town.
Okay,
Cool.
that's his copy.
Yep.
All right, I think we're good.
Yeah, I'll hang on to that one. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, next up is the continued site plan review hearing for 59 and 63 Willow Street. As last time, Rick and I will both be recusing ourselves, and Dan Ham will be the acting chair for this project, so I will turn it over to Dan.
Just leave it there.
Squeak behind you.
We don't need to reread it, do we?
No.
Ready, Jim?
Yes, I am. Good evening, Jill Mann here on behalf of the Hamilton Development Corporation. Here with me this evening is Thad Masco, the architect in charge of designing the building, and shortly to arrive will be Charlie Ware and April Ferrara, the site design engineers. Last time we had met, there had been a couple of things brought up, and the most important of which was the board had actually requested that there be a peer review. The peer review was to encompass traffic as well as the stormwater management system. Both of those things did happen. In addition, we did get comments from the fire department that we have reflected on the plans, and I'll go through those. So essentially, we also had a question, the issues that were raised during the last meeting, it's always best to kind of start with that, was the status of Max. Is it going to stay? Are we going to preserve it? Traffic parking, again, we have the peer review. The stormwater management system, has that been reviewed, and we do have a peer review. And then also the emergency vehicle access throughout the site. That was addressed not only in the traffic, but also via our engineer going to the fire department and conducting what they call a turning radius, as well as incorporating into the plan some accommodations on the site. So essentially, each of those matters has been vetted and has been addressed. And I'm going to go through each with you. So the status of Max. So Max, as you know, is the front building. It's about 900 square feet, and it presents right on Willow Street. We had been asked to preserve Max, and it is the intent to do so. The HDC will be selling that as part of the package when it sells to a third-party developer, along with the development plans, if you will, for the entire project. The petitioner is proposing to enter into an agreement with anybody who would acquire the property so that Max will be preserved. You can't necessarily tell somebody you can't take down a building, you can't do this, you can't do that, because if the building, something happened to it, there's nothing really you can do. And it's always possible the building of that vintage could have some issues. So part of the requirement, or the, I guess you could say the restriction, would be max will stay. And if the person who is buying the property, or entity that's buying the property, wants to redevelop Mac's site and they want to pull a demolition permit, then they would also have to pull a building permit to do so. And what I mean by that is a replacement. And obviously that, again, comes before you, because it's site plan approval again. And you would see that the structure that would actually take place or replace Mac's would be subject to your jurisdiction. In the event that there was a demolition permit pulled, that particular owner of the property would have to demonstrate that there is some sort of landscaping being proposed. Notwithstanding that, there is a trigger that would allow the neighbors to get together, and if they don't like the idea of Mac's coming down, no matter what, there would be a landscape plan that would take the place of Mac's, that they had the right to actually acquire that particular property to preserve the building should they so choose. And there's a mechanism for that. So that's how we have, in fact, addressed Mac's. And tomorrow morning, just so that the abutters do know, we are having a meeting with the HDC to review that restriction, because it would be a private restriction for the benefit of the abutters, and it would be between the seller and the buyer, future buyer of the property. As far as traffic and parking go, so there's a lot of concern. The police chief said there's not enough parking downtown. The abutters are concerned because people like to park on the street. This particular project, I will tell you, meets to the letter the parking requirements. In fact, is probably overparked because there are 8 spaces dedicated just for the commercial. Notwithstanding that, the petitioner requested that we investigate opportunities within the site to increase the amount of parking. So we actually did that. We went from having 26 on-site parking spaces to having 30 on-site parking spaces, which means we're providing 4 more than zoning even requires. If you will remember, as I said, there are 8 parking spaces dedicated for the business use, which would otherwise be available to residents of this particular development overnight and on weekends. The business tenants and occupants will not be permitted to park overnight in those spaces. And where those spaces are is it's right, yeah, I don't, that's what, the south, the northeast side, right? Oh, right there. Yep, that's where we added the 4 parking spaces. So we did address that concern. Relative to traffic, the traffic report did go out, look at the site, and conducted an assessment, and basically said, you know, all of the, if you will, infrastructure is designed according to standard. The one concern they had was whether or not a fire vehicle could access the property and be able to turn around. In response to that, Ms. Ferraro, right there, met with the fire department and actually, or discussed with the fire department how the fire department could get in and get out of the site. And we have designed a turnaround area, which again, you can see it's kind of, it's new, it's cross-hatched. And we end up creating that area, and because we had to create it and come out, we did propose to put in some more landscaping behind that, just to provide a visual buffer, a better visual buffer. I mean, nobody can go on that except for emergency vehicles, but we thought it'd be a good idea to do. So we addressed that. As I said, the traffic consultant reviewed the access drive and said that it was being built out in accordance with standards, that the stopping distance is good. You know, when you exit this particular property, you can see all the way each direction. It's a clear shot. There's no impediments. With regard to how you access and exit, as you know, in this particular location, can you flip all the way to my pictures? Oh, you are a wonderful man. Thank you. So this is just a view of the site going toward Railroad, right? I'm on the Railroad one? Yes. So I'm looking toward Railroad, and you can see there are no sidewalks. It's just kind of it almost looks like a parking space that's kind of right in front of the driveway. There you go, right there. And there's no sidewalk. So a person actually doesn't just exit where the bushes are, although we are taking out those bushes, they come forward and they exit where you see the end of the right-of-way would be. So that's going in one direction, then you wanna show the other direction, you might as well. So here's just the direction going down the street and looking and seeing what it is. I just thought it'd be nice for you to see it. So that's the situation. The one recommendation that the traffic consultant had was that we could ask the selectmen to impose a no parking restriction within 25 feet of this driveway. Honestly, I don't think it's necessary. I think that, you know, it would be more of a burden on the people who live on Willow Street. I mean, they can speak to it if they want it, they can have it. I mean, it's more up to them than it is to us. But it is not a necessary thing. It's just something that if the town wanted to do so, they could. It was kind of like one of those types of recommendations. The true recommendations, oh, I apologize. Yes, Mr. Clark?
I was just thinking, the study said it was for line of sight. So somebody egressing that location would have to look in both directions, and if there were cars parked on the side of the road, they suggested not having them there. But that seemed like common sense to me, but
Yeah, so
saying otherwise?
I'm saying that if a car is parked there, they park there presently. And the report said that there was a sidewalk there, and there isn't. So.
But it said 25 feet in each direction from the exit point of
From the exit point, you could have no park. We're fine with that it's not necessarily sight distance or anything with regard to safe stopping distance. It's a different calculation, and one that doesn't really restrict the placement of driveways. So no matter what, there is safe stopping distance. People can see you, you can see them, and there is no issue safety-wise relative to this particular driveway. That's it. I mean, and really what they were talking about that had a recommendation that did have some safety impacts are the sight triangles. So you see how you have those low bushes? Some people would argue that those get in your way, but again, the actual exiting point is not back there. It's actually where you can see the different color of the pavement. That's where you really exit. And that if you had cars parking, I don't assume anybody parks in front of Max. I don't know. Does anybody park in front of Max? They do? Okay, well, it's a good question. I might as well ask. So they park right in front of Max? Okay, so then they do that as well. So. Yeah, oh, but that's a different way. So if you mean going toward Railroad. Yeah, going the other way, I can see one. I was asking, so you can see, I mean, again, you can see beyond the cars, you can, because of where you would pull out and pull in, and they did verify that. If the abutters want to impose 25 feet on each side, and they're willing to submit to that, that's up to this board to request, and the planning board, I mean, the selectmen to actually endorse. I don't think it's probably a necessary thing. You lose 2 parking spaces on the street. With regard to the site triangles, we did address that. They're all, when we were redoing the landscaping, we actually do have ground cover. They're not high growing trees. And to the extent we have anything, we're maintaining the triangles, and you can see it. So that really basically, in a nutshell, is the traffic aspects of the particular. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
That one space you were talking about close to the driveway
Yep.
is where John the barber parks.
Okay.
It's a Honda.
I actually saw it there once. I saw a car in that spot once.
Yeah.
Again, it really, you pull out to that point, and there really is no issue relative to stopping distance. It's clear from the traffic report, there is no issue. So it's up to the board and to the selectmen whether or not they want to take away the 2 spaces. Okay, so relative to the emergency access, we talked about stormwater. Everybody was asking us about stormwater. Can the site really handle it? Was it properly designed? And your peer reviewer basically said, yes, it was properly designed, and yes, the site can handle it, and yes, that we did address the concerns, and that we continue to receive the water that is currently being drained to that site presently. So basically, the peer reviewer did validate and confirm the conclusions reached by Meridian Engineering.
Where is the fenced-in area for the catch basin that was
Sure,
mentioned?
thank you very much. I wanted to actually talk to you about that, Mr. Wheaton. So we have yet to to install the fence, and wanted to discuss this with this board and see what you typically do. Water cooling. It's boiling. So, typically, we had been told that this board doesn't normally put the fences around. We can put a split rail fence around. That particular basin will hold, at its most saturated, it'll hold 3 feet of water for a day, and then it immediately begins to infiltrate. I mean, it's not a huge basin that is filled with water at all times. It's not a swimming pool by any stretch of the imagination. But if the board prefers to have a split rail fence around it, we most certainly can do that. It's not an issue, but we wanted to actually talk to the board about whether or not it was a necessity to put that kind of structure around a basin that really doesn't merit it relative to safety purposes.
I mean, that would interfere with some of the, at least early on, talked about circulations with respect to the other parking areas and the shops and so on behind it.
Well,
If you enclose that.
Sure, we actually did try to get permission from the property owners behind, the business owners behind, to permit us to go across there, to put a bridge and then have a way to actually go onto the cow or the banks areas, backyards, basically their parking areas, and we were told we could not. So there no longer is any unfortunate no circulation from this site to those properties. So it wouldn't interfere. So it's something that we can discuss, and I mean, I would love to hear the board's input. I mean, what's your position relative to those split rail fences?
What's the surface of the infiltration basin gonna be? Is it a grassy area? What is it?
Yeah. So it's a whole bunch of different materials.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly grass, and there's probably gonna be a little bit of stone on the bottom, just to help the water get in there.
So, I don't get what the purpose of preventing access to it would.
The peer review said scoop it out, all the dirt out there
Yeah.
after construction and put sand bed in.
That was in the, one of the catch basins.
That's
That
the
wasn't
one
in
we're
the-
gonna use during,
retention
so we have one of the catch basins gonna be used during construction, so that we don't allow any of the materials from the site to drain off during any kind of an event. No matter what, all basins have to be cleaned out before we get our occupancy permit and you sign off, under our O&M plan. So that would be cleaned out, but this is not a sand bottom basin.
Grass is there, it wouldn't be a sandbar.
What's the depth of it? What do you have right now?
It's about 3 feet.
I mean, you couldn't fall in and even get hurt, but we see that a lot of times by reviewers. They always ask you to consider putting a fence around. Sometimes it's just for lack of a better term, a boilerplate comment relative to when you have an open basin.
I'm not a big fan of fences, but I don't know what.
Not a safety issue.
No. Not with regard to this particular basin, because it's not standing water all the time. I mean, it's no different than if you have a vernal pool on your property, really. Well, probably it is. Vernal pools maintain water all the time.
Never mind. I can't think of the words I want.
Sure, no worries. So I appreciate that, Mr. Wheaton. I did want to actually bring that up. So let's just make sure. Talked about max. So distance to parking, turnaround. We talked about and the other thing. And the other thing that the traffic person had asked us to put on the plan was a stop bar and then a stop sign, and we did do those. Those were the recommendations that we incorporated into the plan. One other thing was we did have to, when we spoke to the fire department, we were asked to install a hydrant, and we have done that as well. April, it's at the beginning of the driveway, right? It's not up the driveway?
On the right-hand side.
Yep.
So, yeah, right.
There you go. Okay. So we did have to add a hydrant to the property, because remember last time we spoke, I think the abutters had told you there were hydrants at either end, I think like all the way down to Linden and all the way down to Railroad, and you really did need something more centralized, and we wanted to just put it on the plan wherever the fire department had it, so April had that on her list to actually do, and that was added now. Let's see. And then with regard to some of the other comments in the stormwater peer review, they just asked us to add an erosion control sock, which we will do, and then to have inspections 4 times a year, and then to maintain each of the basins to the extent there some sediment actually adds and continues to kind of, if you will, grow, right? So it gets added to the site and you have increasing amounts of sediment. So with the quarterly inspections, if there's a lot of sediment, it can actually harm the ability for the basins to properly drain and infiltrate. So that's why they've asked us to do it every 4 times a year to inspect. And if you see that there's excess sediment, to remove it, which is something that is already, I think, it's already part of our O&M, but we're just going to highlight the quarterly aspect of it.
Yeah, and it's only twice a year before, and they asked for 4.
So we'll increase to that. And then the other thing was, obviously, you need to maintain all your setbacks. Title V requires, and so does stormwater management practices, that you remain 50 feet from wetlands and then from septic to infiltration, right?
Well, not 50 feet, now it's only 25.
25 from septic to infiltration, 50 feet from wetland. And we'll comply with all of the setbacks, and the plans actually do show compliance. And the reason why he wrote that is, or I think it was a woman, no, she's the other one, because they just want to make sure that you know that the exact location of the septic system sometimes can change when the Board of Health gives its final approval, but we do recognize the fact that we need to maintain those setback distances. And that is basically it. And at this point, I believe we have delivered to the board all of the various requirements relative to the site plan. And at this stage, if you have questions for us, obviously. Oh, I apologize. You know what? Good thing, Thad. We had never shown you a picture of the sign. And since we don't know what the project name is, we were going to name it something inventive, but we thought, just put this on it. So you're allowed to have a 36-square-foot sign, but that's a little large for this area. So what we had done was Thad created a sign that was only 4 feet, but it's what, an 11-foot sign?
Yeah, it's 2.5 by 4. It's about as big as the marker board behind.
Yeah. The point is simply to kind of.
Off the ground, about that high. Granite posts, carved wood, navy blue and white. Typically, the developer has a project name, and then the street address is important for people to find it. So quite basic, classic font is what we're proposing now. I would expect the developer might come back with something that's showing that might be slightly different, but that's the proposal. Put one simple ground mounted floodlight on it, very low, just a little bit dull so folks can find it. Just enough for folks to find the project without it really feeling that it doesn't fit in a residential neighborhood.
And it's externally illuminated, as Thad had said. And then inside the project, if you have maybe 1 or 2 businesses, you will have a small wall sign on top of the entrance door where you're going to go in, and it'll be there again, externally illuminated, so there won't be any glaring illumination.
Great.
And we did add landscape. You want to go to the landscaping plan one more time? So when we were talking last time about the landscaping plan, if you remember, we had told you we were going to extend the fence. We just hadn't had a chance to do it at the last plan turn. So the fence does go all the way up. The confusion was when we had originally seen the site, there's a split rail fence in part, but you need to have a full fence to go back. So that's what we did. The stockade fence runs from, and you can see it all along the corner against the Willow Street property and then goes back up, and that's where the stockade fence will be. And then we also supported and enhanced the plantings, even though it's a natural buffer. Those plantings are a lot of deciduous trees and not evergreen trees. So what we did was we planted white pine trees that will grow rather quickly, as well as be dense. So right behind that fire truck turnaround, we planted the giant arborvitae, and they are actually common to the property because they exist in the rear corner of this property down near where the other Willow Street property is. And then we did enhance, as you can see, all of those new plantings, even where it is a natural buffer, where we're trying to push or pull all of the disturbance out. We actually did supplement because we wanted to have some evergreen trees grow up and then eventually form and kind of meld with the canopy that's deciduous.
What's between the the detention basin and the parking lot for Black Cow now? What was the proposed?
It's basically a line of arborvitae now. Isn't that arborvitae? Yeah. So we wanted to honestly kind of block it for our purposes as well.
Right. No fence though.
No, not there. Mm-mm.
Does the board have any more questions or concerns?
I think people are gonna crash through that and take the shortcut to the train, but, maybe a fence will be required, but.
I mean, you know, you mean people will come from outside and come through the property?
No, people on the property.
Oh, people on the property will
Will
go up
go
through the.
through the
Oh,
quickest-
they're definitely gonna come that, I would assume that they'll walk that way through the we're hoping through the public parking lot. But I mean, we can't, yeah, you're right, you can't control where people are gonna walk or not walk, yeah.
Unless you put a fence up.
Yeah, even then, I mean, we could, I guess, put a fence up going in the entire property, but that isn't really, I mean, that wasn't desirable to us to have to do something like that, because then you're just creating that kind of a hardscape everywhere. We were doing the hardscaping more in order to protect and screen the abutters from this particular property.
Looks good.
I don't have an issue with not being a fence. I mean, that's the developer's issue down the road maybe, but. Richard, anything else you'd like to add? We can open it up to the public now.
Let me ask you, Mr. Chair, Liz Altman from the engineering corporation or company that we hired at the expense of HDC is here if the board wants to have her present either briefly or in detail both of the reports that we've received.
I wouldn't mind a brief, if she's willing. Just a quick summary. I didn't realize you're here, I apologize.
That's okay. My name is Liz Altman. I'm a professional engineer with TEC. We were retained by the town, planning board, to take a peer review of the site, the first site plan, or the last set of site plans, not this site. And wanted to just make sure the board understood the three things that we look at in a site like this, which was trip generation, site distance, and the parking. This is, when we do trip generation for this type of site, we use the Institute of Transportation Engineers publication, which is called Trip Generation. And it basically takes sites from all over the country and counts them, and then we use that information to project future sites. So the two land uses that we would use for this mixed-use development was a small office building and the residential apartments. And like I said, this is very conservative for this type of use because they are mostly suburban sites that are counted. This is a slightly more downtown area where you might expect people to walk to the train station instead of drive to their job, walk to downtown restaurants, shopping, things like that. So the projections that are in the report of 134 daily trips for the site is conservative. I just wanted to make sure the board understood that. And it's likely that this site will not see that level of traffic because of its location in the downtown area. They have added on to additional parking, which now complies with ITE, also has a parking generation, and they project peak demands for different land uses. So they actually have combined, they have provided enough parking to accommodate what ITE projects for the maximum demand for the residential and the maximum demand for the commercial. So even though these land uses are fairly compatible, the office you would expect to peak around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the residential would peak sometimes 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. So they're a little more compatible with regard to parking overlap. And then as far as site distance goes, we do site distance from the vehicles exiting the site and the vehicles along Willow Street, making sure that they can see people that are pulling out of the site. We actually have to, by regulation, do site distance from 14 feet back from the edge of the travel way. That's why site distance is so restricted in this area, because 14 feet back is, this car's stopping back in here somewhere. So people might stop here just to make sure that there's nobody walking on the street, and then they will pull forward to make sure that they can see in either direction. And once they pull forward, there is enough sight distance along Willow Street to be able to, for them to make that turn safely. There's also enough sight distance along Willow Street for if this person does pull out, there's enough sight distance for somebody to slow down and stop. Yes?
Yeah, is the 14 feet from the front of the car or from where the driver is?
Where the driver is. It's the driver to the edge of the traveled way. So that's why it's so far back. And so when you're that far back, the sight distance is restricted by this building here and then on-street parking. We recommended removing the on-street parking just so people would have a little more sight distance here. People along Willow Street would be able to see this car pulling out a little bit better. That's up to the board, that they can consider that if you'd like. It looks like they've addressed the comments that we had about the fire department turnaround and the concerns about the drainage or the infiltration cleanouts and everything. So I don't think that we have any outstanding issues. I did want to just ask where the sign will be located.
Right. It's on the plan. Right there.
Okay. So, we would just want to make sure that that's not in a direct line of sight of somebody exiting the property. We call this paved area, this additional paved area, we call it a sidewalk, just probably because pedestrians would use it. It does end like right past the property and then just becomes edge of pavement. So I don't think, unless you have any other questions, happy to answer them.
There's adequate sidewalk across the street, right?
Yes.
Correct. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Patrick. Sorry. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Hi, Elaine Swenson, 6 Linden. So we did attend last night's Board of Selectmen meeting, and the Chief of Police did a presentation on safety and parking downtown, and raised a high level of concern about the added parking that this would generate in the downtown area, and said that it was guaranteed that there would be extra parking occurring on Willow Street from the overflow of this. So I don't think that he was really brought into the discussion about this. He also stated that he would like the HDC to fund a traffic study, because the last one that was done was in 1980. So we'd obviously like that done. And he said that downtown parking is a major issue. I don't know if this was relayed to you by Mr. Hubbard, but he said last night that he was going to let this board know about that discussion, as well as the HDC.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick, have we had any communication to that effect?
I've heard nothing from Jeff yet.
Okay.
I'll address that.
Hi, I'm Martha Driscoll from 85 Linden Street. Some of these issues have been spoken to last night at the Board of Selectmen. A lot of you were here for that, and a lot of you weren't, so I just want to put a few things on the record. One is we're still concerned with the bylaw and the proper amendment process. We worked with the Board of Selectmen. I believe that you folks will be invited to a meeting as well. We're going to take that offline tonight. We're waiting to hear back from town council, but there are still concerns, and we just want to let everyone know that that is not an issue that's been resolved yet. We hope it will be. That's our goal. And once it is, then we can move forward. The other issues that we are concerned about, and Ms. Elaine has mentioned it, is last night the chief of police did talk about the safety issue and the parking and the traffic. And I know that it was brought up that with the proceeds of the sale of the Willow Street, they were going to use those funds to do that traffic study. I think that is putting the cart before the horse. I think that traffic study should be done now so we can make sure that we aren't disturbing the way that the commercial businesses can grow and allow parking for them. Because right now, what we are doing is we're creating a residential program, not a commercial program. And if you look at the purpose of the overlay, it says specifically that the purpose of that overlay is to increase the commercial growth without residential taxes. And 18 to 20 units over a little small commercial space does not meet that requirement. And I think that's something that needs to be vetted out. I think that we need to work together. I think we need to make sure this works for everyone. I know that the HTC has a big mortgage balloon payment, and that's funds that we want to use too. But it can't be just done and all of a sudden go from, and this is another thing I'd like to address, just put aside, is that, they're saying, it's been said that, this bylaw was done 4 years ago. And no doubt, I'm not denying that. But when we were working with the HTC, it was a 40B program, and we were trying to work with them in Harbor Light, and we've already done this, the downtown, with the Accord project, and it was smooth. But now, and it was a 2-story building, not a 3, and it was a 40B, not an open permit process. And since the Long Meadow issue didn't work out, now it's come to the forefront. And granted, information has been brought to us that we haven't had an opportunity to vet, but some of it just doesn't align correctly. And that's why the town council's been brought in, and hopefully we can get this issue resolved. The other is that I understand that some of these issues are being addressed, and we just want to look at them more closely. I mean, you've talked about the trees, increasing the fence size. The whole thing with this retaining pond is concerning to us in that we know water collects there. And I know it's been tested and it percolates well, and the high design of now what septic tanks look like is very different. But when you say 3 feet of water can sit there a day, the whole triple E issue that's around in this neighborhood, having mosquitoes and things of that, collected water is a concern. So, maybe we can get some more information regarding that as well. And just as to a couple of notes, you indicated that you put a hydrant in at the end of the street there at the corner on Willow Street. How far is that from the building? Of the road, but like how many feet is that? But driveway on,
The existing one, no.
There's one in here, the hydrant is right beyond the sign. That's right up there. A little bit closer.
It's, a little bit closer.
There,
Yeah, it's in there.
So that's 30 feet from the corner or something?
so for like insurance purposes, that puts you guys at the worst level of protection.
500 feet is,
It's a much better level.
that's where,
Okay.
Yeah. Can I interject for a minute? A lot of the hydrants around town have been moved, and they are much further from houses than the distance that is there.
Okay,
Much
so I
further.
live on the corner of Willow and Linden, and now I have one that is directly on my lot line on Willow, so it's much closer.
Yeah.
And I have one across the street.
But I live on Moynihan, and there used to be one across the street from my house, and it's now around the corner about 150 to 200 feet from my house, and others on the street that were closer are further away.
I just
They've
want to make
changed.
sure that we have one, because, I mean, we are so close together. Once, if any house goes up, it's a concern.
I understand that.
And
But
we're
what
all,
I'm getting
you know.
at is that distance for where that is reasonable
30 feet?
compared to what I'm
That's good.
seeing around town for
I-
other houses.
Because I thought you said there wasn't one there before.
There had not been, and we put one in now.
Okay, so that's great. That's
And
great.
it's fully sprinkled over, too.
So I think that's, you know, basically our concerns now. I do request that the planning board take this under advisement until we actually get a resolution on the bylaw issue with planning council. We do have a meeting tentatively scheduled for next week. We're in the process of doing that. Members of the finance committee is going to be attending, planning board, board of selectmen, and the HDC, and the people, you know, the abutters. And, you know, we're not up here to be obstructive or angry. We want to make this work. We saw what happened down at the north end of Willow Street, and people were not well vetted, and although they tried. I just don't want that to happen again. I want us to understand what we're getting into, that it's gone through the right process, that we're legally allowed to do this, and that it's going to meet the requirements. I mean, as far as what they have done to make this the most pleasant looking and accommodating to the neighbors, you know, they've gone the extra mile. I'm not denying that, but whether or not it actually should be there is really the question. So, thank you.
Julia Maycock, 62 Willow Street, right across the street. Attorney Mann, who has control? Can you go back to the picture looking down Willow Street from the south? No, that's from the north. Yeah, this is my front porch. And the driveway comes out here, so that it's gonna come out into our house and into Lane Whipple's house. But more to the point, there should be a parking ban here and here, because when you go out there, when you go out this driveway here, that people block all the time because they park in front of it, because it's not a real driveway, we have a paved driveway on the other side, people block it, you can't see if there are cars parked here and here, and people do park in front of here, even though it's not real parking. So I think, A, to answer your question, there should be parking ban there so that there's visibility. That would just be a safety issue. I'm wondering if the abutters can get a copy of the report, the independent report, so that we can actually read it instead of hearing a summary. I would again echo my neighbor and ask that this board just hold off on the vote until we're able to hear from town council about the bylaw issue and able to have the meeting so that we can discuss our concerns. I would ask that if you put up a sign, since it's gonna shine right into my front room, that it be lit down and very low. There's already a tremendous amount of light. There's a street light, and then there's light at Harbor Lights. And I also do wanna say that, you know, there was a statement made the other night about neighbors supporting this. I think neighbors are trying to work with the development because it's by right. The support was for affordable housing, and we did that for 2.5 years. You know, this is a different beast, but it is what it is, and I appreciate, you know, the board's trying to work with the neighbors. Max does need to stay there as a barrier, and we'll have more discussions about that tomorrow morning. But I think that, you know, the traffic, I can't understand how even 30 spaces for 22 units is enough parking. 18 units, and they only all have one car?
We've got extra parking now.
Well,
Four of them are.
there's,
yeah.
I also,
Have more.
okay, I also don't really understand how I don't know anybody, I sit there in my house and work in my, and I go, wow, I can't imagine, I can't believe the traffic. And the traffic when the dance studio or the food or the Accord Pantry or whatever, and there's parking all over this place. And frankly, the parking downtown is not enforced. And so I just don't understand how that amount of traffic isn't going to impact the neighborhood. It just baffles my mind. So when I sit there and see it all day, that's not the case. And that people stand up here and say, it's not going to be a problem. Well, it's already a problem on Willow Street. It's already a problem. Sit in front of my house for 6 hours, Mr. Stein. You don't live there.
No.
You don't live at this end.
I'm in the business district. You're adjacent to it. So again, it's the business district. It's just the way that people drive through the business district. Dodge tree trucks come down the street at 6:30 every morning.
Yeah, no, we're well aware of that.
So it's part of living downtown.
Well, in 1995, when we bought the house, it wasn't.
Well, times change. But again, there was.
Are we not like getting in an argument?
I'm just going to say that parking is an issue
I'm not
here.
saying it's not.
Okay, and it's safety is an issue, and the Accord Pantry has parking, and the dance studio has parking problems, and people park all over the place. So it's an issue. If you do, all you'd have to do is sit there one day and watch it.
Thank you.
Could you stand up there for a minute more? I'd like to ask her a question.
Sure.
It has to do with the recommendation that we got is that you don't park 2 cars on either side of the entrance to the access room. And I think that would exacerbate the problem, but I'm not sure. But we can make it a condition that we follow the recommendations of those that have been advising us, and then you'd have less parking in your neighborhood.
We can't do that. It has to go to front of the Board of Selectmen to change the parking. We don't have the control of that. That's not on our
We do,
property.
it's part of our site plan review.
But it's not,
No,
not on our site.
We can make recommendations, and the Board of Selectmen, or what's known as the Highway Commissioners, they're the ones that have the power
Okay, so
by
we don't need-
virtue of state
We
law.
can make a recommendation to them to look at it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which we can do.
Parking and the traffic issue.
Okay.
And by the way, I just wanted to make one statement. We do.
Can we, if you're gonna make any more statements, can you do it at the
But
microphone?
that's okay. Well, okay,
No,
if
I
you've got to
can't.
get up, okay. So
Yeah, sorry.
my only other comment on that is that we have gone and talked to the businesses that are in the downtown district, and they did not know about this going on, and not to say that is a defense, but when they heard that they were going to have 18 units of people, which is great because it could increase their business, but it also will decrease the parking availability. And they don't have, right now, there's not enough parking for the businesses to sustain. I mean, you talk to the folks at the Weather Vane, you talk to the new business that just went in with the Wellness Tree, Salt Cave, and the new consignment store. I mean, they were flabbergasted, and they're right on next to this way up Julia's house. They're right on the corner of Railroad and Willow. And as it is, they don't have enough parking. So to your point, Mr. Clark, to restrict more parking, because nobody can park there, so even the neighbors who should be able to park there, the overflow from this new development, and I know that they've accommodated with more parking spots, but you know, you say they're only going to have 1 car, or they're not going to have any cars, but you can't restrict that. If somebody comes in and they have 2 cars, you can't tell them they can't live there. I mean, you can?
Yeah.
And now you address some of this.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Rick Mitchell, 36 Rock Maple, and president of the HDC. Last night, the police chief got up and was talking about 2 things, traffic and parking. And he said parking has been an issue for the 10 years that he's been police chief. And this has been brought up to the Board of Selectmen on numerous times, and nothing has been done. So he said that he thought it would be a good idea for the town to sponsor, using Chapter 90 monies, a downtown traffic study. No, was it parking? Okay. I believe that he was talking traffic. He suggested, either way, he suggested also I spoke to him briefly before he got up and said, the HDC, from my perspective, and we have not talked about this as a board, would be willing to either co-sponsor or invest in doing a downtown parking evaluation, because the parking, as Martha indicated, plan was done in 1980, so it's now almost 40 years old, and it's not consistent. The signage is not consistent. It just it hasn't been updated. So we're well aware of that parking is a concern. We hear various things from various people in the downtown businesses. Mr. Cutter owns the building. Now, most of Railroad Avenue said a lot of the parking problem is employees of other businesses are parking in front of those businesses. We had a previous town manager who said, and anecdotally, we don't have a parking problem, we have a walking problem, is that everybody wants to park right in front of wherever they're going. So there are a lot of opinions about whether there's a parking problem and a traffic problem. So the whole point is that the HD certainly, from my perspective, is amenable to get involved and help support a comprehensive master plan looking at parking in the downtown in conjunction with the police chief and the police department doing a traffic analysis of the downtown and determining whether streets need to be made one way, whether it's better improved signage, parking, how that should be handled, because the business activity downtown is going to increase, and it certainly is incumbent upon the HDC, if it's promoting the downtown businesses, to be involved in helping solve that, or at least clarify that and solve that problem. So that's something that we're addressing and plan to address. And we want to do that, and I think the police chief wants to do that now, not waiting. And nobody said, I don't know where that came from, because I was here for most of that meeting and then I went home and watched it. Nobody said using the proceeds from the sale of that for waiting for the study is. We'll have to figure out how much that might cost and what our budget will support, but I would advocate getting that done now rather than later, so that when and if this project is approved, it probably won't be in construction for a year. So that gives plenty of time for the police department, HDC, and the Board of Selectmen to go through a comprehensive analysis of parking and traffic in the downtown. So that's going to be addressed.
Rick, at one point you, I think the HDC was the sponsor for some angled parking, and does that increase the amount of parking on Railroad Ave if you did some?
Yeah, but it reduces street capacity too.
Didn't you do that study?
Yeah, well, we sponsored a study to look at Railroad Avenue.
Did it increase the amount of parking?
I think it decreased because you can only angle park on one side of the street as opposed to parallel parking on both sides of the street.
Yeah.
So that was the major objection, is it looks a whole lot better in terms of opening the street up and being more pedestrian and bicycle friendly, but it lessens the parking. Also, I want to address the businesses. Angela Arvides, who owns one of the businesses right next to Timeless Interiors, is on the HDC board, and we've been very supportive of the downtown businesses and provided and paid for insurance and did a lot of work to support their activity the day after Thanksgiving. So, and she's one of the prime sponsors of that business group. So I find it hard to believe that businesses downtown didn't know that was coming. And in fact, I've talked to a number of those businesses, including Paul at the Weather Vane, telling him what was going on down there. And so there's been a lot of talk among the businesses about things that are going on. There was something else you brought up, Martha, and I didn't quite understand. You were talking about an overlay district and something. This is not an overlay district. The end of Willow Street towards Asbury where Hansberry's used to be is an overlay district.
Yeah.
Requiring a special permit, but this isn't so. I'm sorry?
What is the commercial overlay district?
That's called the Willow Street.
What?
There's a Willow Street.
There's Willow Street, which is what we just talked about. The COD is out of the dump, the old dump.
Isn't
This
there,
is the
there's,
business district.
there's an overlay at the end of,
Willow Street.
Yeah.
yeah, Willow.
It's four properties.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
This is
So,
just the B.
so there's no overlay in this. That's how the, what's the guys that built the building? You know, the 3-story building. What's the plumber's name? Alazola was able to build that because it was a special permit. So I think that answers the question. The other one I wanted to sort of, people last night, I was listening to some of the comments, and one of the comments was that this is really imposing a high-density development, and it is, it's the only one in the downtown, and it's really going to be a negative impact. But I was thinking about this, and I'm going, well, in fact, there's a residential development in downtown encompassing 40 units. Actually, it's between 40 and 44. Nobody can give me a straight number on 1 acre of land, and that's the Hamilton Housing Authority. And they don't have, and that's on-street parking as well. So we're proposing something that's half the density on the same land. So I think people need to understand it's not like suddenly, we're imposing this thing that there aren't other equivalent or larger projects in the downtown. Now, I'm sure the neighbors, when that was built, were not happy about it, but it's been there now for probably 30 or 40 years, and it's now part of the community. And so I just want people to think about those kinds of things. And the other thing that came up last night was, well, gee, this really isn't in the purview of the HDC to be building residential development, and residential development isn't appropriate, it's not economic development. Well, in fact, our statute, I went back and I kind of looked at this and I said, well, I think our statutory authority is for residential development, and in fact, I have it, I won't read it unless people want to hear it. It specifically calls out for residential development as one of our goals and one of our authorities. So, it's also smart development in the downtown, and it's the kind of thing that the master plan called out as for a real lack of a market rate rental housing. So we think that this is a good project, and we've worked really hard, as you acknowledge, Martha, because we're addressing Julia Maycock's request for Max to be preserved. We've added additional parking. We're extending the fence that Elaine and Carl Swenson have asked for. We're upgrading with the screening. So, and we're going to be at that meeting, and we'll talk about whatever the issues are. I'm not sure what that meeting is. I guess it's about the bylaw.
There's 2 parts. So there'll be the bylaw issue, because hopefully at this point, the lawyer will have issued heard from the town council. And then there'll also be, whatever remaining topics we have
Okay.
tonight.
What are, I'd be just curious, just so we can come prepared to answer those questions. Do you know what, other than the traffic and the parking that you've mentioned tonight?
Well, once we
Can
get a
you,
copy of
if
that-
you're gonna
Yeah.
provide any testimony, it needs to be at the podium. Otherwise, it won't show up anywhere.
Again, Martha Driscoll. So to prepare for that meeting, the abutters would like to have a copy of the independent study that was done, so we can review it in advance as well. That may bring more questions to it, but we're happy to put the questions out to you folks ahead of time. I mean, it only expedites the meeting, it makes it much more concise, and people can get their issues out in advance. So we're happy to do that. We're hopefully shooting for Wednesday, because I know the Board of Selectmen meets on Thursday.
This Wednesday?
No, not tomorrow, a week from Wednesday. Tomorrow we have HTC at 7:30 in the morning, so we can't do it on both ends of the day. But so, yeah, we absolutely. I just think that, you know, this forum is great. It gets the issues out on the table, but then you have to come back and digest them, and then those lead to more questions and things of that nature. So we'd be happy to provide some of those in advance.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Johnson, 6 Patton Drive. A couple of very specific micro points. If anybody has driven by the public safety building, as we all have at night, and you try to read the sign, you can't, because there's a spotlight that's staring right at you from underneath it. You're just not legible. So however it is that sign is designed, the spotlight that's aiming up to light it also blinds anybody coming in the other direction. So just be thoughtful in how that is done. I know early on, neighbors were concerned about light pollution, and I know it's a favorite topic of this board. I think it's really important that it be addressed, because as you go through the construction, you're going to want to address some of the issues with it. So I would highly recommend, whatever it is that the planning board permits it as, build in some way for the neighbors to have input while it's under construction, rather than once it's too late. Because once the lights are there and they're wired, you know, it's sort of an act of God to sort of get things changed. But if it's early on and you see someone getting ready to fix in a certain way, address it early. Those types of things are very, very, very important. As far as the parking, the selectmen do have control over the parking. The planning board, however, does have control over sidewalks. So you could provisionally put a sidewalk in front of it, almost making it impossible for someone to park there. And then you can sort of, it might be a way to find a blend. And maybe the town eventually finds out that it wants to have a sidewalk go all the way to the corner, across, you know, not just in front of Max, but all the way. It might be something that's desirable. So put it in your tool. Those are all relatively minor things. Among the more important things are our master plan, all of our downtown growth, all of our housing plan, all the discussion people have had about smart growth, transportation-centric growth. It all really favors rental. The HDC is trying to keep the flexibility to market it for someone buying into rental, but also, if need be, to have their flexibility to sell. I think it's really important for the community that we have rental. I don't know that you can constrict it, but there may be other ways, as you look at the plan, that you might have rental-friendly ideas that may not be favorable on the selling side. And so I would, sorry HDC, but I think that the community really needs rentals. And to the extent that you can find a way to paper your decision that has that preference, I would strongly encourage that. And the last is, I love the idea that you know, people go out of their way to save Max. I mean, I think that's culturally really important for the community. So
Could I ask you, come back to the sidewalk idea? I didn't know the planning board had control over sidewalks, but.
To the extent it's on your line, you can.
On our property.
If it's on your property.
Yeah, frontage-wise.
Yeah, but now what about in front of Max? I mean, where's the right of way end in front of Max and?
That's for someone else. So we had.
April is the right of way on the front of the building.
It's not 100% at the front, but it's pretty close.
So the lesson we learned with the Volvo dealer, no, before that, Mike's Volvo, is that he controlled going in there was no sidewalk controlled between, the town didn't have any rights to the sidewalk. The state had Bay Road all the way up to the edge of Mike's land, and when it came time we want to have a sidewalk to have both sides of Bay Road balance itself, we couldn't. In this case, HDC owns Max.
Yeah.
You can, if you guys can come to an agreement, you can actually find a way.
Move Max building back.
Well, you can't move his building back, but you can, that little gravel area, that.
We don't know where the
I'm just saying, you don't have as contentious a person as Mike's Volvo, and maybe you can find a way to solve a sidewalk if you want it.
Part of the problem is that the space in front of Max is also a parking place for the people that go into Max.
Yeah, so you'll hopefully have a parking study and a traffic study long before this gets built out. So with any luck, your decisions will be able to sort of be flexible enough on that. Anyway, I've said my piece.
Jill, do you have more to say?
Well, just a quick couple of follow-up things. I forgot to mention that we are going to be putting in 2 affordable units. So that is a pretty important thing relative to restricting it to rental or.
That's
or
part of
sale.
our inclusionary zoning bylaw, right? You're required to have 2.
In addition, with regard to whether it should be rental or whether it should be sale, I would not ever suggest any type of restriction with regard to site plan approval. Really isn't applicable, and I wouldn't want to burden a property like that. And with regard to Max, it isn't far enough back to allow the distance between the building and then a sidewalk. You actually can't do it. Not you can't, we can't. We don't have the capability of creating a sidewalk because of the location of Max and the right-of-way relative to the town of Hamilton, just so you know that for informational purposes. And with regard to providing the abutters, I absolutely think the abutters should have, full review rights for any kind of peer review. But I do want to make it clear that the peer review engineer was here and that every single item that had been noted as of concern and recommendation was addressed and was satisfied. So in fact, pursuant to the site plan requirements, the HCC has complied with every single solitary requirement of site plan approval and has given this board all of the, if you will, requirements relative to site plan approval. I don't know what more can be added. I mean, it's my opinion, my legal opinion. Obviously, you need to potentially hear from your town council, but when you have a bylaw on the books for 4 years, and I've read I read all of your town meeting minutes, unfortunately, and all of your warrants from the time you first enacted it to the time when you had the modification. And it's pretty clear that your bylaw is enforced because the AG reviews and approves. So I guess from our perspective, we are looking for the board to say that it's had sufficient opportunity to receive information, but obviously I defer to you for what you would like to do.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Just a quick question for you, Jill. You and the consultants have made a number of changes to the plans in response to the comments that have come to you folks. When will we see new plans?
You will get them tomorrow.
Okay,
Tomorrow.
great.
And I will drop off some large, we just didn't have the opportunity because of how long it took we just got the peer review comments too. So we'll drop off large size plans and then you'll get electronic plans tomorrow. So, I mean, that's true. You probably haven't had a chance to.
Great, thanks. I'll promise to folks that I will put the peer review reports as well as those new plans up on the town's website, so you'll have access to them.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, does anybody have any more questions? Oh, we have another.
Carl Swanson, 6 Linden Street. My concern is the architecture and height of the buildings. Through the charrettes that were done right before the bylaws were changed to allow 2+ floors above the commercial space. In the charrettes, the citizens that met at the library, they were all very concerned about something being more than 2 stories tall. 100% of the people, as I moved from table to table, and what I heard throughout the large group was everybody wanted a village feel, and what's being proposed is a city feel. And I'm highly concerned that what's being proposed does not fit the town of Hamilton. And as was not only the building, the structure on the north end of Willow Street, but also the tall, narrow building that looks so out of place at the dental office on Railroad Ave. If you talk with the community, I haven't heard of a single person that is pleased with these aesthetics, of the look and feel.
Yep.
I think there's very little about this design that meets the look and feel of the town of Hamilton. And I request that the decision be delayed until there can be further vetting. I believe that the community does not understand what's being proposed here tonight.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that? May I?
Okay.
Just tell me yes or no. Okay. First of all, the maximum height that's allowed is 35 feet. The ceilings will be the floors will be 8 feet high, plus whatever is in between each floor for whatever. So 3/8 or 24. You got 24. You got 11 feet left to build your roof and to put the spaces in between. The other part of it is that the building will not be able to be seen from Railroad Ave because that long building that Cutter owns that has several different businesses in it is high enough that if you're at least on that sidewalk, you can't see anything up, and even across the street, you're going to have a hard time seeing the roof. So I don't think it's going to impact, and there's going to be enough green stuff around. I don't think it's going to impact the village feel. And in fact,
I understand the dimensions that you're stating and what's allowed now compared to what was allowed previously. I don't think that you're listening to my statement of what the people of the community were requesting. And at one point, Brian Stein even brought up on his laptop and showed a rendering of multiple 3-story buildings, and everybody was appalled. And Brian was apologetic at the time, saying, look, I'm doing this part-time, on my own time, I mean, as Brian was involved with putting these renderings together, and everybody was appalled. And you're not gonna, so that currently, Mac's property is a bowl. You're gonna infill the bowl. You're gonna take up a half a story by doing that. You're gonna add 3 stories, and then you got the roof line, which is really the height is another story in itself. So you're talking about, from what's there now, what will, in a sense, be a 4.5-story building compared to what's there now, even if you're at the same height as Hansberry's building on Railroad Ave.
I don't think you're right, and I don't mean to be rude. The problem,
that's math.
okay.
We're not gonna debate this right now.
It has to
Patrick's
do with the way the
reviewed it.
codes are set.
It meets all our bylaw.
Yeah,
I think
it'll meet.
It meets the new bylaw, right?
It meets our bylaw.
Yeah,
And that's all I'm gonna say about the bylaw at this point. Thank you.
yeah.
Just a clarification. It has nothing to do with the height has nothing to do with the new bylaw. This is our building code in Hamilton. The roof cannot exceed 35 feet, which is the measurement between the peak and the who? Yeah. So it's not anything special about this bylaw. It's what's allowed throughout the town.
Thanks. Thank you, Rick. Anybody have any more questions? I think we need to continue until the next hearing because we haven't seen the revised plans.
Correct.
So I make a motion that we continue the hearing for next meeting.
December
And
17th? No. Yeah,
Yeah,
17th.
December 17th.
I would strongly support that because perhaps the Board of Selectmen will have resolved whatever they're going to do by then as well, so that would be a good
Is
decision.
that a second?
That's a second.
Before you vote, may I make a comment?
Sure.
That's fine, no problem with that. I would ask that the board start considering, or maybe even draft, either individually or collectively, the conditions that they think you may want to apply to this project, so that we have something to respond to. Otherwise, this will just drag on and on. I think by the next meeting that we will have an opinion by the town council, so I think that will be resolved. But just so that we can come to and be able to respond to any comments or conditions that you might want to impose on this project, it would be really helpful for a constructive discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. That was going to be my next statement.
Real quick to that point, there are a number of items that TEC has pointed out within their review letter that we should include, in my opinion, as part of the conditions. I also heard that downlighting for the signage was important, which we all know that it is. That would be another condition too. So definitely board members between now and the 17th be thinking in terms of the kinds of reasonable conditions you may want to impose.
Absolutely. Do I have a second? Did you give a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Patrick, can you draft a couple of conditions and send them around?
Sure.
So we can just kick the ball down the road?
You can't deliberate electronically, but I can send it to you and you can call me.
You can give the comments back to me. This is yours. This is yours.
Is that considered deliberate?
If you're doing it on electronically, yes. More than two people.
Under the downlighting and stuff?
Right.
So,
Well, I think,
side
review-
lights, parking bollards,
Sure.
sign lights, they all go off at 10 or 10:30 or 11 or
Yeah.
time.
We learned that on the Willow Street thing.
They've tried so hard to have it out in the public. Crazy.
Move over, Bill. You don't
There
get
you
the whole space
go.
to yourself anymore. I know you're very important.
Did you bring your tag?
Oh, man. It's cold out there, man. I like to sit over there because it makes it just right there.
I think you guys have been very, very open with site plan review all the time. Seeing it since July or something.
I have the next thing, that's why.
Oh, really?
The neighbors can say they didn't know anything about it.
She's gonna talk about
Heard about it. It's crazy.
Yeah, nobody has to come, yeah, no. Oh, that you'd want to kill me.
Yeah, well,
No.
more
30 in the morning.
Oh, bummer.
Oh, my God, and I always am, by the way. But I'm gonna miss my boot camp class.
Is that
Oh, always.
okay? Now the seniors have their inning. Yeah.
Hey, Larry.
Industrial looking building is next to Cantor. It's just going.
I don't know. I don't think it's on their property.
It almost looks like a riding.
It's a horse barn? Yeah.
Horse of some kind.
Oh, no, it's on the adjacent property. I know what you're
Yeah.
talking
Is
about.
it a horse arena?
I mean, it's
Assuming it's an
sandwiched-
arena, yeah.
Sandwiched in there between,
Patrick, you're so.
you know, Highland on one side and Canterbrook. People at that end of Canterbrook want to look
Isn't
out.
it unreal? I know,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I just like
I
to
think
know.
it's like a riding arena, isn't it?
Like, Larry asked me to
I'd
do
like to
something,
ask
he goes,
Jill,
isn't that
see-
easy to
see-
do?
see-
I'm like, oh.
I wouldn't be happy if
It's
I
all
was that
Larry's.
right there.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, it's
It's always Larry's fault.
sandwiched right on that little end of piece of.
Yeah, thank you.
Better living through chemicals.
That's right. And structure.
All right, next up, we have proposed minor modification to the senior housing and stormwater special permit for 354 Highland Street, Cantor Brook development. So Jill, can you just give us an overview on what that's about?
Yep, so this is basically a request because when we originally had permitted the Cantor Brook project, we had put in this as security, a tripartite agreement, which is more the commonplace methodology because many developers actually seek traditional financing. Mr. Smith has not sought traditional financing, so he would prefer to be able to simply pledge a unit, which usually developers don't want to do, but Mr. Smith would prefer to do that. However, in order to provide that security and allow for it, because your decision specifically said you have to have the tripod, you can't shut the door. Because the, because your decision specifically addressed security as being through a tripartite agreement, I needed to come here to explain to you what type of security then I provide via this performance mortgage. So basically, in your decision, you require that a developer complete all infrastructure before they can begin selling. And the reason for that is to basically put a strong arm on the developer to make sure they finish it in accordance with the plans. In certain communities, they'll just release lots as you go, so it's similar to what you've been doing. But many communities feel like it's just too difficult to maintain, so they ask for a form of security as you have, which is the tripartite. Now we're asking for performance mortgage. So in order to ensure that Mr. Smith completes those items that remain incomplete, which I had identified in that spreadsheet, we are asking that we pledge and grant to the town a mortgage on one of the completed units, which are worth 4 times what the mortgage amount is. Your mortgage is still only for the $140-something thousand. Nonetheless, the collateral that you possess is worth a tremendous amount more than $140-something thousand. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt,
Oh, please.
but just for everybody's information, this booklet that you have with the binder clip has all of the various legal instruments, et cetera, including portions of the decision that Jill's going to be referring to. There's also in here a number of the areas where you're going to need to sign the release to the covenants too. So just to keep you following along.
No, it was no small task. When Larry asked me to do it, I was like, oh goodness. And he's like, can't you do it, today? I'm like, well, not really. It did take a lot because you have to go through and you have to do certain steps. So the first step would be to amend your decision and to deem that amendment to be a minor modification. And why I think it's a minor modification is because it's simply a substitution of collateral. I'm not asking you to waive collateral. I'm not asking you to change a material term of your decision. I'm simply asking you to make a substitution that continues to protect you. So the first thing would be to deem it to be a minor modification. The next thing would be to accept the modification, to basically say, yes, we, the board, deem a performance mortgage to be suitable collateral in order to ensure that the developer completes all of the infrastructure. Then the next step would be to review that bond that I presented to you. We call it a bond. So basically what it is it just sets forth all of the items that need to be completed via the infrastructure. So it sets forth the binder coat, the underlayment, the overlayment, the drainage, the landscaping, the curbing, all of those items that you need to complete infrastructure for a project are identified, as well as the cost to complete those things. And the reason why we provided you, attached to that bond, a list of all the invoices attendant to those charges is basically just to support those amounts so that you know that we didn't simply create this number. There was, in fact, a rational basis upon which to base that particular number. And that, again, is included in your pamphlet. So you would approve the bond. At that point, then you would say, okay, we approve the bond, we approve the form of security. Then you would have to accept the performance mortgage as security and authorize me to record that on your behalf. At which point, when I issue to you recording information, you then release to me the release, which says basically all of the units can be sold and built at that point, because you now have full security. So it is a lot of steps, but they're all necessary steps to ensure that this board remains secure. The only, well, it can be, you can enter into a sale agreement, you can't even do that really, but you can't sell it until you release the mortgage, so you can, as long as, everybody knows what a mortgage is, right? So it's an encumbrance on the property. You can't sell to anybody until you release the mortgage, because you can't release the mortgage. So when it comes time to sell it, the mortgage remains in place and has to be basically satisfied. So, for example, if we were to go to sell that unit, I don't want you to think we can't, because we can. It's just that what we would have to do is give you the money, all of it. So I'd have to give you $144,000 then to hold in escrow. I can't just release it.
So if for some horrible reason the project goes completely belly up, our collateral is in fact that unit.
That unit, that's yours. You actually,
Which
you
is-
actually-
Whatever it is worth in the state of.
It would be, yes, exactly, whatever we worth in the state of the project. However, that particular unit would be complete, would be part of the condominium, so no matter what, even if you would assume its value because it was, because the project was strained, even if it were half, even if it were a quarter, it would still support your value. But I do want, it is important to me for the board knows that you are firmly secure.
It's the assumption that the required improvements or infrastructure would be completed prior to us releasing the mortgage.
Oh, either that or you would get the cash from the sale of that unit, yes. You would never lose security, yes. So to Mr. Smith's point is, okay, you would hold it in abeyance, but if somebody came along and wanted to buy it, I don't think this board cares whether it's a mortgage or cash in an account.
Right. The assumption is that he'll have the improvements done before he wants to sell unit one.
Oh, yeah, because that's the model, that's what he uses.
Right.
Absolutely.
Historically, it's the last unit we sell.
And what do you think that is, that 12, 18 months away?
They're cranking right now.
We have 9 units sold to date. No, it's 18 plus months away,
Okay.
depending on sales absorption.
18 to 24.
Correct.
But the improvements will continue to be done, and your mortgage will continue to be at that level. So we're anticipating, obviously landscaping can't be done because of the condition.
So we'll be holding that mortgage for a couple of years.
You will be, but you'll be oversecured very, very shortly.
When will the septic facilities be installed?
They are.
They
So
are.
the septic system is installed completely, and we have had various testing. We're waiting for one more thing.
No, it's all done. We applied for our COC
Okay,
today.
we did, that's what I was gonna say. I even included in your package, a copy of, installation information relative to the septic. We just didn't get, you get a certificate of compliance from the Board of Health, basically stamping on that big sheet saying the system has been installed pursuant to the plan.
Yep.
And that it runs, because they test it, and we did have it tested. So that'll be issued shortly, but that had been done for a while. So it's really the big major items to be done is the landscaping, the curbing, the sidewalk, all of those items that I had delineated. More hard stuff, hardscapes.
Can I just ask it? I'm not sure it's very relevant. There's a large industrial building, riding arena, something being constructed on Highland. Is that on that end of your property, or is it on, locate that on the map.
Rick and I talked about this, a little surprise to us, but that is, bear with me, that is.
It's on the other side. It's on Highlands,
Right there.
right in there.
Right
Is
there.
Okay. So that caught you completely by surprise.
Olga built it, huh?
Yes.
Okay. And it's what is its intended use? Do you know?
I can only tell you because I saw the building permit. The building permit is for a private riding arena.
Private riding arena. Okay.
Who
Okay.
owns the property there?
Olga,
Yeah.
you know what, she has always used the stables, and then she had some on her own. So I'm not surprised that she's doing something. I didn't know she had, is it a big?
And that's definitely a detriment to your development.
No question.
No question.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
Oh, yes. It's a horrible thing to look at. right out the back window of all the people that are buying houses there. I totally sympathize with you.
Spend a lot of money on landscape.
On landscaping, that's what I thought you were going to say. Okay.
And that's all setbacks and everything?
It's an awful big arena for a private use.
So
And
you-
she can't sell to other.
Right, she'd need a permit if she was going to run a commercial enterprise out of there.
Yeah, there's a number of them around town, though.
Yeah, there are many.
I mean,
This
not-
is
most
very,
of them are
very-
most of them are on larger parcels.
This,
but-
yeah, this is really, really close to his development. I would be
Yeah.
upset by that too.
Well, you know we're improving landscaping then.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, we are seeking, for the board, I did include a draft decision for you as well. Basically, to go through all of those items that I said we have approved in order for you, if you so choose, to accept the performance bond as your security. And then what we would ask is, because, so the way it works for us is we have to have the condominium formed. We're gonna form that on or around January 7th. Once the condominium is formed, then we will have the unit one will be available for me to put a mortgage on, but not until until we form the condominium. So what I was asking is, in order to, I guess, just streamline the process, is for you to sign the full release, deposit it with Mr. Reffett, and then at the point of time when I record the mortgage and I show Mr. Reffett a copy of the recorded mortgage, if you would then permit him and authorize him to release that release to me, so that we are able to transfer that other unit, the first unit in the series of sales, relatively quickly thereafter.
Patrick, do you have any issues overall with this idea?
No.
Anybody have any questions or? I mean, with all the paperwork, it's a little overwhelming, but it's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty straightforward concept, so.
It is,
Yeah.
but you know what, it required so much
Yeah.
support, it was crazy, but it really.
Mortgage is complicated. Legally, yes. It's a lien.
Well, that, but it's just all the other stuff that was already in the decision.
Do you have a separate copy for us to sign?
The
How many copies do you need?
the decision
Okay.
and the release, just one of each.
So we need to do the vote first
Four motions, yeah.
for declaring this is a minor modification, correct?
Yeah, she's got 4 motions and votes listed out here.
Yeah, so I have all 4 of them set out.
Okay.
Brian, I'm just wondering if we should abstain from voting on this?
Given,
That she's also the attorney for the HDC. We see a problem with that?
No, everybody knows you're the.
Okay. I
It's
just
not me
want,
personally, you don't have a personal relationship.
okay, I just wanted
right, I
to
mean, he's,
be
Up
clear
in-
about that.
It's good to announce it during the hearing that everybody.
and he's the petitioner, right? It's,
Yep, yep, I just want to be
yeah,
clear.
no, yeah, I get it.
No, it makes sense to say it.
Yeah, so Patrick's right. The first thing we need is a motion to approve the amendment to the original decision as a minor modification.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. Second motion would be to approve the performance mortgage as a reasonable and acceptable form of security in lieu of the tripartite agreement that is sufficient to ensure that all improvements will be completed in substantial conformity to the site plans approved by the decision and compliance with all conditions as set forth in the decision.
Second.
Oh, can you say so moved?
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Third is I need a motion to approve and accept the bond estimate provided by the petitioner in the amount of $141,360 as being an amount that is sufficient to complete all outstanding roadway and infrastructure improvements in accordance with the approved site plans and to ensure compliance with all conditions set forth in the decision, provided the petitioner shall continue to be bound by all of the conditions set forth in said decision, including but not limited to the delivery of payments in consideration of the affordable component that requires the delivery of payments to the town.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous? Last is a motion to sign the release, the covenant, and sign the release, and to have the Director of Planning and Inspections, Patrick Reffett, hold the signed release in escrow pending his receipt of evidence that the performance mortgage and this amended decision have been properly filed with the Registry of Deeds. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
You're in business.
See that typo I have to correct?
So then we need, so then we need signatures.
Yep. So it would be
How many?
on the release as well. Did you have a copy of that? Of the release. That I'll give to-
Okay.
And then Patrick, we'll do the other one.
Mr. Whedon.
Patrick was organized, he put together this whole thing.
How about your pen? Thanks.
Oh, it's open.
Okay.
I don't know why they call us paper pushers.
Anybody coming from the town?
Okay.
We have not
Oh,
heard
yeah,
anything from the town. You know, we have seen, to my surprise, though, a lot of people
Yeah.
that have sold homes in other communities, moved into Boston,
Yeah,
are unhappy in Boston.
and they're coming back out.
You're coming back out.
My surprise.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Migration.
Yeah.
It is.
People can't give up their cars.
It's like Green Acres.
Yeah, I think they were unhappy with the noise and the
Yeah.
traffic and
Yeah.
just city life.
Boston's traffic, though,
I feel I
is
gave it before, right? Is that the
Yeah,
one or is that-
that's it.
Oh, Massachusetts traffic.
Jaja.
You ever watch the news and see the pictures?
absolutely not.
I don't blame you.
I don't believe the news.
The news. It's all fake.
It's all fake.
Yeah, somebody draws pictures of
Patrick, do you want to do the next one?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
So the other part of this was that, that Mr. Smith has received a couple of requests to buy additional units. And in order to get the foundations in, before we can't get the foundations in, I need the board to actually grant me one of those partial releases.
Wait a minute, say
before
that
January
slowly.
7th. Pardon?
Say it slowly, I couldn't
Oh,
hear
I
you.
know, I'm quick. So we have sold 2 additional units, 1 single-family home
Yep.
and 1 unit in a triplex. And as a result, we need to put in foundations for both of those buildings immediately. Because as you know, we just got this horrific snowstorm. Thank goodness next week will be warm enough to put in the foundations. But right now, we're up against weather. So we don't want to have to wait until the January 7th when we know we're going to be able to get the master deed, the condominium formed. So what we're requesting again, and I appreciate the board's indulgence, is a partial release only for a foundation permit. We're not even looking for a full building permit. We will wait until the release becomes effective and we file the performance mortgage. All we want to be able to do is install a foundation. But before we can do that, we need this board to actually allow us to do that. And those are the similar releases that we filed all the time. It basically says you can do one thing, well, 2 things only: install a foundation for building 6 and install a foundation for building 4. And that's what I'm asking for.
Anybody have any issues?
Nothing like success.
Yeah, I mean, the way they're selling, yeah.
And the faster we can get it done, the faster the better.
Yeah.
I move that the planning board approve
Partial release?
Partial release. Yep.
partial release to build foundations for building 6 and building 4.
Correct.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous?
This I'll record right away, Patrick, and send to you.
Okay.
Whoa, 3 signatures in one night.
I know.
We should get paid for
Boy,
this.
you did the A&R too.
Oh, yeah.
Paid per signature? Yeah.
But that wasn't you.
That wasn't me, that's good. Next time I'll try to have 4. Even numbers are good, right? But I have to run to Wilmington now, I'm hearing at 9:30.
Oh, yay, have fun with that. Be careful.
Lucky you.
Wilmington is.
There's a lot of black
Scheduling
ice.
things a little too close to
Oh.
the...
9:30, it's only a 40-minute drive, I'm fine.
Yeah, you should be all right.
There's black ice out there, be careful.
Is there?
Is there?
Yeah.
I just got new tires. My husband said,
helps.
Jill, your tires have holes. My tires are a mess. I have new ones.
Oh, Jill.
Well, I hit curves a lot.
By all
I'm
that
signing
city
this,
life.
you know.
I love the city. I live in Middleton, though. I'm afraid that I'm not in the city yet. I want to be.
By the way, Chris Shepherd's no longer,
Oh, he isn't? Okay, you know what, I thought, did you mention that to me when I asked?
Yes. He unofficially resigned.
I thought he's officially resigned.
He may have, I just haven't heard that.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything to
Okay,
that effect.
My bad, I thought I heard he said
He hasn't
he
been
had
here
sent a
in a
letter.
year.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And hope
Thank
everybody
you.
had a good Thanksgiving, and I will see you on the 17th.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Delighted to hear it.
Good luck.
I know, right?
Hey, do we have any energy to talk about OSFPD, or do we just want to move to minutes?
Move to minutes.
Move to minutes.
Minutes,
Yeah,
Better be
I would
that
move
I'm
to
leaning
minutes.
that way too.
Fair enough.
All right, yeah, so next time, after site plan review, we will talk about OSFPD, so have some comments and questions and so forth with you, please.
Are there any amendments that have been drafted so far?
No, we were just gonna open up discussion to talk about it. You know, it's quite lengthy for a,
Make it a one-step
for a
process.
for a bylaw, yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of ridiculous how long it is and how drawn out it is, and
I have a proposal for a bylaw change. I'll draft it up. So I looked at line 7 of permitted uses, where the development at Willow Street came under. The bylaw line that says 2 or more units on top of any commercial use. And with the exception of the fact that we have a height restriction that provides for no limit
that's not
on
true.
residential development downtown.
It's not,
I took
that's
that
not true,
Septic
septic,
and lot.
setbacks, everything. So.
in terms of use, there's no limit on use. You can regulate it in other ways, but in terms of use. So I went to the former director of the BRA, Kairos Shen. I said, Kairos, have you ever seen a zoning ordinance like this that has an unlimited number of uses? And he said, no. Is there anything like this in the Cambridge zoning ordinance? He said, no. And I said, well, what would you make of it? He said, I'd make of it as a really sloppy piece of drafting. So I wasn't here in 2016, okay? But when I look at this zoning ordinance, I think that is a very serious oversight. I would propose something that would limit the amount of square feet of residential that could be added on top of commercial use. The current proposal for Willow Street has 8 times as much residential square feet as it has commercial square feet. Now, it's not 8 stories, okay, because the commercial square feet only occupies a tiny portion of the first floor. But I think this is a sham of the original intent, which was mixed-use development, but not 8-to-1 mixed-use development. So when the year is up, when New Year starts, I'll have a proposal that we have a bylaw change that, you know, creates some kind of a limit on the amount of residential area that can be added on top of a certain amount of commercial area. It certainly won't be 8-to-1 like the Willow Street proposal.
Be interested what your friend at the BRA says when you start defining multifamily, what limits are typically imposed. And we're not Cambridge. We're
Well, they begin with a limit on uses, number of units. You know,
No, they don't.
It's an FAR.
Well, no, there's FAR, sure, in some cases, absolutely.
Why don't you write it up? We'll discuss it.
Yeah, but as I say,
it's tricky. It's tricky in our sense because we've got, and again, there's a lot of a lot of.
There's nothing tricky about it.
Sure there is.
Okay,
Sure
you're relying.
Just hold on, let me talk. You've had your few minutes. The issue that it is tricky is because, number one, we're on septic, which is a limiting factor on all lots here. Number two, you've got so many varying size parcels in downtown. Some are obviously super narrow, they're built out to the lot line, and they can't do anything because of that and because of their septic. There's other parcels like 63 Willow that obviously has a decent sized parcel along with a couple others on Bay Road. So you've got tiny and you've got quite large. So,
but it's very easy. It's very easy to take a tiny little, commercial building, and to build up 3 stories, and then to build out, double the footprint, and then in the process, create an amount of residential use that is, 6, 8, 10 times the amount of commercial use.
But it's not, given septic restrictions. You have to have land for septic, which most of them don't have. You have to have land for parking, which most of them don't have.
I would like to see use regulated as well.
If
you want to rely on all those other things, that's your opinion.
Use is
I would like to see the amount of use regulated
You're talking about the number of units being regulated, not use regulated.
FAR regulated.
Bill,
it's really a regulation of FAR.
Okay.
Okay, I'm fine. I'm just saying that's where I come.
we did an FAR for Willow Street overlay.
Yep.
And if we
So
shoot
there's
it
our
down, we shoot it down.
0.75, I think that's where we ended up.
That's fine.
Yeah, I would suggest, Bill, you look at the Willow Street overlay FAR.
Yeah, we'll see how.
As a model?
Because we did talk about
Perfectly,
that.
okay.
Could I bring up a different subject?
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if we should talk to Wenham at all about what's happening to the Prince property. I don't know what is planned, but I know Pansy's died now, and her husband is, Joe is, he's getting on, he can't move around. I don't think he'll be around. So what's gonna happen after?
What's the Prince property?
Is that the one right before you get into town?
The Haley property?
Yeah.
Oh.
Which properties are these, please?
It's the great big property that's right
On the
our
border
town
where the
border.
train goes through, just on the far side.
Farm property?
Yeah, on the right side as you're coming into Hamilton from. Wenham.
It's a big horse field and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's zoned as a commercial district. So I don't know whether the planning board in Wenham is planning to make a district that matches ours. Or, I think when you were talking with them about, the park and putting the septic down, or I guess that
Is an idea, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You must have heard what their plans were going to be about the downtown area.
Well, not really. They knew that at some point that property could potentially become available.
But that property is available probably within a year or two.
Well, maybe, yeah. And so I don't know what they've taught. That was years ago that we
Maybe
talked about.
Patrick could listen to the plans.
I can find out
But first of all,
if there's anything.
Yeah.
why do we
there
care?
Must be some long-term inheritance decisions and so forth, because Pansy and Joe Haley have been forever.
I'll get you some intel, Peter.
Right.
Peter, why are you asking him to do it? Why don't you do it?
Because I think it'd be more appropriate for us to be talking to the planning board in that town.
You're part of
rather
the
than
planning
me.
board.
Pardon me?
You're part of the planning board. I don't get it. Why are you asking him to do it instead of you doing it? See, you know a lot about it. Why aren't you asking the people?
I don't think it's appropriate for a single member of the board.
If you're representing the whole board.
Can we move on?
And it
Yeah,
may
we-
be a little bit premature.
He's already agreed to talk to the.
Yeah,
planning
I
board.
understand. I'm just questioning.
Okay. We have minutes to approve, November 19th. Comments?
Being nosy over here.
Well, it's sitting right there for God's sake.
No. Can't find it.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from November 19th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
None.
Thank you. Anything else from other boards or reports?
Let's see, on Thursday evening, we have basically a public discussion outreach effort with it's regarding the municipal vulnerability preparedness effort. Planning board members are invited if you're interested.
The municipal.
It's basically an effort where we've done some public outreach. We've had a big half-a-day work session working with a consultant to review what global and climate changes could be to Hamilton and how to prepare for them in the future. So what we've been able to prepare with the help of MAPC is looking at various areas in the community with the help of police, fire, a number of other folks too, to enumerate locations where there are susceptible areas, neighborhoods, et cetera, that might be impacted by inundation, extra heat or whatever.
Do you have it in draft form?
I can get
Title,
I can get
in
the
water-
board a
Water
report.
title as well? No.
It's
we
the
don't
whole
have
thing.
Well, we're kind of above that.
that. That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Miles River, baby.
yeah.
Patrick, do you have that flyer in color as well as just black and white?
I think I do.
If you have it in color, I'll repost it on Facebook pages.
Okay, great.
I should have asked you a couple of days ago, but
All right,
I'm pretty hectic with other things.
very good.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.